In today's lesson, we will be creating a first draft of a Mayan travel brochure. You should each have a blank sheet of paper in front of you. If you do not, please pause this video and make sure everyone has a blank piece of paper in front of them. Next, we are going to flip over to see how to fold this brochure, this piece of paper. Please have your paper ready to watch and copy how to fold in a tri-fold pattern brochure like the one pictured here. Please make sure everyone has their brochure draft folded. So your blank piece of paper should have 3 different sections in it. Please make sure everyone has it. If not, please pause this video. Okay, when you can draw lines to help you separate it, but after it's folded, you have the crease, so you really don't need to draw the lines, but if you would like to, you may. Now, this is just a draft for collecting data. We're doing a brochure for a grade on the Maya, and we're going to be watching a video that the information is very familiar, but we're going to be starting and stopping it and putting that information over here. When you have your piece of paper, create your official brochure. I want you to label the inside. The first one on the left, I want you to put Mayan art and architecture. Architecture is like the buildings they have. The middle section should be Mayan facts. And the final section is Mayan academics. Please pause this video to allow everyone to write these 3 sections down. Then flip your paper over and we'll label the other 3 areas. Hopefully everyone is ready for the next section. Flip your paper over to the back and label these 3 sections: culture and sports, Mayan food. And this last one will actually be the cover of the brochure, so you'll need a title. I just labeled it the Maya. You can put anything you'd like that it is about the Maya, but you can get creative and come up with something from your imagination. So let's start watching the informational video, and we're going to be stopping it about every 1 to 3 minutes or so and coming back to these 2 pages and taking notes.
Hundreds, even thousands of years ago, before Europeans came to explore and conquer, the Maya ruled in Mesoamerica. one of the most powerful civilizations ever to exist in what is now Central America. The Maya created huge stone temples and pyramids, elaborate artwork, and a complex system of hieroglyphics that puzzled academics for centuries.
And since I am flipping back and forth, I'm going to keep the video minimized just to help out a little bit. So on this one, when we had, let me go back here, wait a second. Okay, so on that section, it was about a minute long. And so we learned that the Mayan were located in Mesoamerica, which is now known as Central America. So please write that down. Then we also learned in Mayan architecture that they created stone temples and pyramids. So that's a section under the Mayan art and architecture. And the last thing that was in that first minute was that they created hieroglyphics, which was a type of writing. So they invented a type of writing using pictures and their type of lettering called hieroglyphics. Please pause this video and write these down. Continuing on.
Despite these achievements, the Maya never unified and formed an empire under a single leader. Instead, many small city-states, each ruled by its own king, shared a common culture to make up the Maya civilization. The Maya people worshipped nature gods, gods of the sun, the moon, rain, and corn. According to the Popol Vuh, a book that contains the legends of the Maya, the gods began by creating the earth and the sky. Next, they made the animals, the birds, and the flying creatures. There was just one problem. The animals could not speak to worship the gods. So the gods decided to make humans. The first humans were made out of mud, but they crumbled back into dirt. The gods tried a second time, carving humans out of wood. The wooden people were strong, but they did not worship the gods, so the gods destroyed them with a flood. Finally, the gods tried a third time and made humans out of white and yellow corn. The precious corn was the material that finally produced real humans who would worship the gods. The Maya.
Okay, pausing there, let's go back. So we learned in this section that we would list under cultural and sports that the Mayan were a very powerful civilization. So please write that down. Pause here to give everyone an opportunity to write that down. And then next, you need to start, and you don't need to start drawing it right now, but you need to start thinking about what you want on the cover of your brochure. As you learn about the Maya, what thing do you think represents the Maya that you would want on the cover of this brochure? And again, you don't need to draw it right now. Just start getting some ideas. All right, so the next part in this next section was about a minute and a half. So on this part, we learned that they worshipped nature gods, the sun, the moon, rain, and corn. I always thought that was a little odd. Sun, moon, rain, and corn. So please write that section down. And they also considered the cocoa bean very, very valuable. Again, pause while we have everyone write that down. Let's continue on to our next section.
Maya civilization developed in the thick jungles of Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula, spreading into what is now Guatemala, Belize, western Honduras, and El Salvador. 4,000 years ago, around 2000 BC, the Maya began to farm, cultivating corn, beans, squash, and chili peppers. They would have hunted deer, turkeys, rabbits, monkeys, and iguana. The Maya were also one of the first people to learn to use cocoa beans. The cocoa beans were made into a paste and mixed with water, cornmeal, honey, and chili peppers to make a spicy, frothy drink for the Maya kings and priests. Cocoa beans were so valuable that they were often used as a form of money.
Okay, pausing there, going back to our charts. Get your pencils ready. All right, let's see. In this minute, we touched on food a great deal. So we know that the Mayan ate corn, beans, squash, and chili peppers, and they hunted deer, turkey, rabbits, and monkeys, and even iguanas. So pause, please, to allow everyone to have time to write that down.
Over time,
Okay, listen
these
to the
farms
next
developed
section.
into permanent settlements, towns, and villages. By 750 BC, these towns developed into bigger, more sophisticated cities. Some of their cities may have been home to more than 100,000 people. Most people lived in huts made out of poles and vines and plastered with mud. But the ruling class lived in huge stone palaces. Maya cities were the center of their culture. As their cities grew, the Maya built elaborate stepped stone pyramids, paved roads, and raised causeways, wide plazas with tall stone monuments, and altars for religious sacrifices.
And pausing there, flipping back over. Let's see where we're at here. Okay, so we had architecture in this presentation. So the next minute focused on architecture on this side. So on this side, we need to put down paved roads. Remember, they created stone temples and pyramids, but they also created paved roads in this section. Please pause the video and write that down so that you can have that for your brochure. Then on the side of this part, that most people, the regular people, lived in huts, but the rulers lived in palaces. So those are under culture. That's how they divided their society. That the living class, most of them lived in huts, but the royalty, they lived in palaces. So put that under culture and sports. Pause the video as you write that down.
Another common feature of Maya cities were large stone courts that could be used to play a sport known simply as the ball game. The Maya ball game was central to their culture and their cities, and was a symbol of their wealth and power. The stone courts had high sides where people could sit and watch as two teams competed for control of a heavy ball made of rubber. Players were not allowed to move the ball with their hands or feet, instead hitting it with their hips, elbows, and knees to keep it in the air. The players tried to get the ball through a small stone hoop high up on a wall of the court. Getting the ball through the hoop ended the game, but it was so difficult to do that the games could go on for weeks. The ball game was more than just a sport. It symbolized a battle between the Maya gods in the heavens and the rulers of Xibalba, the underworld. The winning team would represent the hero twins of Maya legend, and the losers were sometimes sacrificed to the gods. Sacrifice was important in Maya culture. An offering of blood was seen as food or nourishment for the gods. Sometimes the Maya would cut themselves and offer their blood to the gods. Other times, they would sacrifice animals. Human sacrifice was usually limited to important events, like the dedication of a new temple or a new king, or times of trouble, like famine, drought, or war. War was
In this section, let me just make sure I have the next section here, that I have it correct. Okay. So in this section, it talked about the ball game. That would be under culture and sports. The ball game was a symbol of wealth, power, and battle. Also under culture and sports, a very large part of the Mayan culture was sacrifice. They would sacrifice blood to their gods in various forms. So please pause the video and write those two new elements down under culture and sports. Continuing on
frequent
to our
in the
next
lands of the
section.
Maya. They were not unified under a single ruler. Instead, each city and its surrounding land was ruled by its own king, or holy lord, who claimed to be related to the gods and communicate with them for their people. These small kings fought each other for resources, for territory, and for power. It was common for warriors to make small raids into their neighbors' territory, taking captives and looting their riches. Prisoners were sometimes tortured and forced to play the ball game, after which they would be sacrificed. Sometimes larger battles resulted in a strong city conquering or destroying a weaker one. The Maya were proud of their battles. Warrior kings had their victories recorded on stone monuments, which endure to this day. Between the frequent
And pausing there, let's go back and continue with our notes. Let's see, make sure I'm on the right section. Let's continue on. So in this minute, it talked about how different kings ruled their own kingdoms. Remember, they never united, and that they were warriors and recorded their victories in stone monuments. Again, please pause to allow time to write down those two aspects. Continuing on
and
to the
human
next section.
sacrifice. You might think that the Maya were a violent and warlike people, but they were also scholars and astronomers who made many advances in mathematics, writing, and art. The Maya developed a complete system of numbers based on the number 20, nearly 1,000 years before the development of the Arabic number system that we use today. They also discovered the concept of zero, one of only a few cultures in history to invent it independently. They used their number system to create one of the most accurate calendar systems ever made, one which would not be rivaled for 1,000 years. They made great advancements in astronomy, observing the skies as closely as possible without a telescope. With these, they were able to track the motions of the sun, the moon, and the planets very accurately, and correctly predict their motions even thousands of years in the future. Around 300 BC, the Maya began to write. It was the only true writing system ever to be developed in the Americas. Instead of 26 letters like the English alphabet, the Maya used more than 800 different hieroglyphs. Some of the hieroglyphs represented words, while others represented syllables that could be combined to spell out words and write sentences. The Maya made paper books from the inner bark of trees that folded up like an accordion. A book of this kind is called a codex. In the 16th century, all but a handful of the Maya codices were burned by Spanish priests and conquistadors. Fortunately, the Maya left written records many other places, carved in stone in temples, sculptures, and on monuments, which lets us piece together some of their history.
So on this one, we had total academics. So find your Mayan academics section. We already had that they created writing. They touched on that again, that they created hieroglyphics, the writing system, and their type of lettering. But they also created a numbering system based on the number 20. And they came up with the concept of 0. They created a very accurate calendar. And as we already noted, the hieroglyphics, but that calendar was able to determine the seasons for them. Pause now to be able to write those things down. Next segment.
The Maya have been called by some the greatest artists in Mesoamerica. Although they had no metal tools, they were expert carvers, creating elaborate objects out of bone, flint, and jade. They carved the stone of their buildings, the walls, the doorways, and the stairs. They carved their sacrificial altars and the markers of the ball courts. Most of all, they carved monuments to their kings and their warriors, recording victories and important events for their history. The Maya were also skilled in ceramics, making pottery of many different shapes and sizes. Cups, bowls, plates, and vases were often elaborately decorated with paintings or carvings, sometimes even with hieroglyphic writing. The Maya also made detailed and realistic figurines in the shape of people and animals. Although few examples survived the tropical climate of the Maya homeland, they also made beautiful paintings and murals. Some of the brightest and most vivid murals remaining used a special color called Maya blue. This bright blue color was very strong and did not fade as cities were overtaken by jungle. After the fall of Maya civilization, the secret to making this color was lost, puzzling chemists and artists alike for hundreds of years.
In this section, you need to find the fold that has the art on it. So find your art area, Mayan art and architecture. And we learned in this section that they carved their history into bone, flint, and jade. They created pottery, figurines, and painting. Please pause the video to allow time to write those two aspects down.
At the height of their
Final
culture,
segment.
Maya population may have topped 5 million people. But around 900 AD, their civilization began to decline. It did not fall all at once. Because it was never an empire with a centralized government, the fall was slow and gradual. One by one, cities fell into chaos and were abandoned to be reclaimed by the jungle. But no one is really sure why. Perhaps the population grew too large for the land to produce enough food for everyone to eat. Maybe constant wars between city-states destroyed trade routes and alliances. Even a long drought could have caused people to abandon their cities. By the time the Spanish arrived in the 1500s, most Maya were living in small farming villages, their ancient stone cities forgotten and lost beneath a layer of living jungle. A few cities were still inhabited, but they were not used ceremonially the way they had been centuries earlier. The Maya were one of the most enduring and longest-lasting civilizations in the history of the world. Many people have wondered, where did they go? The truth is, the Maya are not gone. Millions of Maya still live in their ancestral homeland in the Yucatan, speaking Mayan languages and practicing the traditions of their people.
Okay, on this last part, you need to find where the facts are. So turn to the side of your paper that has the Mayan facts. And in this final segment, we note that the Maya declined. Whoops, that's the rats. Hang on a minute. There we go. The Maya declined around 900 AD. That needs to be listed under the Mayan facts. And that their ethnic culture, the Mayan people, actually still exists today. All right, this is it for this side. You can pause now to finish up this side, and then I'll flip over to the other side to make sure you have everything written down on the other side. So please pause, and these are everything that you need to have written down in draft form on this side. And then flipping over to this side. And this is the side that you need for the culture, sports, food, and then your cover page. So you can pause here to make sure everybody has everything written down for this side. So now you have all the facts ready, and we can now create our brochures. We are going to have a next part of the video. It's the Maya Part 3 video lesson, and you're going to make your draft that you'd had, this draft, all that information, and we're going to be putting it into a more polished brochure that you will be graded on, you will turn in, and it will be graded.